And so I run the distance learning degree at Oxford Brookes University in publishing. And Claire is a freelance editor now, but has also done a bit of training. So I'll let her talk to you a bit more about what she does. But we were having a conversation, weren't we, about entry-level jobs and salaries. So you just introduce yourself quickly, and then we're going to talk about that for a little bit.
Sure. So yeah, I've worked in children's non-fiction publishing since 2008. So I was an editor for almost 9 years, and then I delved into the world of children's writing as well, because a lot of what I was doing in my editorial role was actually writing for really young children. So I started doing more writing work too, and then a couple of years ago wrote up a sort of like it's an editorial guide to non-fiction publishing, and I've mentored and trained 6 people through that. So I've done the whole project management, taking a book from start to finish. That's part of what I do, and then really had a love for the writing element. So I've probably written about 30 or so children's books now for publishers. Maybe even a few more actually, because there's been lots of little board books and things and series.
And that's quite common in children's publishing, isn't it? That editors often sort of start writing the copy for them.
Definitely, especially for the younger stuff, where once you've had quite a lot of experience in working on that kind of subject matter, and you understand the kind of content for different age groups and stuff like that, before you get to the age where really you need subject specialists, so things like little books on like farm animals and things like that, so that's how I got started writing on things like that, and then started writing slightly older stuff where you kind of learn how to research properly, and just been exposed to the kind of material that gets put in those different age groups over sort of eight years. Then you kind of build it up in that way. So yeah, it is definitely common in children's publishing. A lot of editors don't like it, or maybe don't like it's too strong, but they don't have that preference. But I definitely wanted to do the writing work. So it was kind of a natural progression for me to do that kind of stuff. And you also have to do, or I've always had to do quite a lot of writing of sales material, like website copy, catalogue copy, that kind of stuff. So there's in my editorial career, there's always been quite a lot of writing alongside editing and stuff. So yeah.
So they're definitely transferable sort of skills, aren't they, or overlapping skill sets, aren't they? Editorial copywriting within the children's and educational markets. So we were talking online about, like, I guess it was sort of like, in what situation, I think the question you posed was, in what situation is it okay to take a lower paid job in publishing if it's going to get you to where you want to be? So what were your initial thoughts on that?
I could probably ramble on about it for a very long time, because it's been a topic that I think I've wrestled with and struggled with for probably since I actually even started in publishing. Because when in 2018, straight out of university, I thought, I'll get a job that means that I might be able to move out of home. I might not have a lot of money, but I've kind of done my degree now, and I'm going to be on a course. And my first job actually paid me £13,000 for the first year, which I don't know what that would equate to now, but it certainly wasn't enough to move out of my parents' house for. And I moved out when I was 25, I think. So I think starting with that, I've always had this kind of like niggle inside that. As I was gaining all of these skills and really realizing how niche your skills are, and just there's so much to becoming an editor and being involved in publishing. I really think it's high skilled. Especially I read job adverts that go out for an editor, and you'd read down the key responsibilities and skill set that people are looking for. And I think that, and sometimes I'll read through stuff and think, gosh, I can't do that now. And I've been doing publishing for 15 years, and I'll see the salaries sort of like £30,000 or something. And I think there's a huge disparity on the skill level that people develop and the pay. And especially, I think when I was sort of 21, it didn't bother me too much, because I kind of had this perception that I would be able to progress and it would stock up. But I soon realised that it doesn't compare to other industries in terms of progression.
Yeah, and I think actually Suzanne Collier just recently published her publishing salaries survey report, and the sort of headlines of that were that, you know, entry-level jobs seem to be, like, you know, I think publishers are recognizing that they need to bump up their entry-level jobs if they're going to appeal to a wide and diverse sort of audience of new recruits. But that actually almost worse than the entry-level salaries is the kind of like early career, mid-career progression opportunities. So like after 10 years working for a publishing company, you're not going to be seeing the same sort of salary rises or increments that would go up with inflation or go up with other industries. And I think that's really concerning, because people are going to be people need to be able to afford to live. They need to be able to afford to start families. They need to be able to afford to do all of those things, and they're not going to be able to do that in the publishing industry, I don't think. Which is really quite a harsh truth to face when you're like someone like me who's a publishing educator. So I think it was a really interesting question to pose, and I don't know what so you went on to talk about what when sort of in situations where you think it might be okay to take that initial hit.
So when I've been working with people, and whenever I've been talking about getting into publishing online, my incongruence, as it were, has been, I love publishing. Most people I know in publishing love it. There are elements where it's not super creative at the beginning, like I think we mentioned, but most people I know absolutely love it. But equally, there is a huge unspoken, well, not between colleagues, but a lot of people are unhappy with their pay. So if I was encouraging people to get into publishing, I felt like it was really something I needed to talk about. So when I've spoken to the people that I've mentored and I've done training with, part of what we've spoken about is financial well-being, which I'd never heard of until my sister, who works for a big corporation, it's a huge part of their HR stuff. So I was like, oh crikey, I don't think we have that in publishing.
No.
So essentially, if say an average starting wage is something between, I would maybe 24 to 27, maybe 28, something like that. That would be high, I would say. But 24 to 25 is what I see quite often. When I did the maths and worked out how much that leaves you with, and I think I worked out that it would end up being sort of like you'd have about £400 a month to spend on food, travel home, a mobile phone bill, let alone needing new clothes, maybe therapy, wanting to go to a gym. You know what, everyone knows what life is like. But apart from that, because I do think you can, there's a time to really, but I think budgeting is actually quite a good skill to learn, not necessarily under like huge amounts of stress, but there's an element of you have to learn it. But for me, it's the fact of saving and pensions and like your long-term financial health was an element to it. So
and because you work freelance now, don't you? So as a freelancer, you're kind of responsible for your own pension and your own sick pay and your own holiday pay and all of those things.
So I've been through the whole cycle of working out what to charge by, figuring out what I think is a reasonable amount to be earning over a year, taking off tax, allocating money for all that, like a huge spreadsheet to come up with a figure that becomes what I know that is my baseline that I need to charge, and all that kind of stuff. So having learning about finances, you don't need to become an expert or anything like that, but you do have to have a grasp of your ingoings and outgoings and all of that kind of stuff. So that would be my first thing to say to anyone who's considering taking a job that's not going to leave them very much money, is actually really sit down and see, and because it is tricky. If you're going to be under every single month, then that really is a problem. And I think the really awful thing is that actually I don't know if it's awful to admit or not, but I've always had support from my parents and or a partner. They haven't necessarily been giving me money, but I've had
you got
I've
two
had
incomes, or
there's been
safety
two
net.
incomes, or I've known that if I really was in trouble, I could give up my shared flat in London and I could go back to my parents, or I've had that kind of safety net, which a huge number of people don't have, and especially if publishing is really working towards being truly inclusive. I mean, inclusion isn't just about gender or race or disability, it's about socioeconomic status and geographic locate. It's a huge discussion that if publishing really is going to take on, I do think it needs to be spoken about a lot more. So I think if somebody does have that support, then that is really, really important, because getting into debt is really it's not good. I left London in debt, and it took me a couple of years to get out of it and stuff, and it really does take a toll on people. So really understanding your finances and having support, I think, is important. But I feel uncomfortable saying that, because I know that that's could easily be a huge hurdle for people.
And also the kind of flip side to that as well is, like, if you don't have a safety net and you're from a low socioeconomic background and you don't have savings to fall back on, you possibly can't afford to go for a low entry level job in publishing. But it's almost the truth is really, and this is what sounds horrible, is like maybe publishing isn't even the kind of a long-term career that one should be looking at, because you're never gonna, some people are never going to get that progression over the course of their career and lifetime, and I think that's the thing that's really difficult. So really I mean, I know that, like, as an educator teaching in HE, students are paying very high fees, and I'm incredibly aware of that, and I always try to justify or rationalize it with myself, in that we are giving students skills that are transferable. Like, yes, you could go off and work in publishing if you've done a publishing degree, but we're really teaching you business skills, business management, finance, those kinds of things, and that those can be used across any industry. Almost all industries require communications, whether it's internal or external, and we see a lot of graduates go on to be like internal communications people for like large corporations, and so they are publishing documents, they're publishing reports that go out to like shareholders or customers and clients, and they're doing marketing, they're just not marketing books, that kind of thing. So, and I think that's I was just going to say, it's certainly the degree and all of the skills that you either you get from higher education or you get from probably 2 or 3 years doing the actual job are highly transferable to other industries. Like sales, marketing and business is just kind of the future, really. If people want to get into anything, that every company is going to have a marketing plan, a business plan, and sales is a huge part of so much. So it just might be a slightly different route than they potentially expected, or maybe has brought them to it in the first place. I think the other thing to point out as well is, when looking for jobs, is that the sales jobs sometimes might not seem like the kind of job that you want to do if you're a booky person and you've done English lit and you're coming from that route. You might not think that the sales jobs or the account manager jobs are necessarily the ones you want to go for, but they tend to pay higher and they tend to have bonuses. And actually, if you're a salesperson going around seeing what booksellers are interested in, understanding the market and what trends there are, that puts you in quite a good position sometimes to swap over into editorial, because it's not a case of, I've got this idea and I think it might work. It's actually, I can see the gap in the market for it, because I've done the job. I know what teachers will buy and what they won't buy, or I know what bookshops are interested in and what they're not. So I think some of those sales roles often get overlooked, but they're generally more lucrative.
I tend to see sales, sometimes marketing and publicity roles definitely they're like a notch above even for the starting salaries, and anything like techie as well.
Data and insight, audiobooks as well, I've noticed.
Yes, I have. Audio,
it's a little bit of a slightly higher bracket.
And maybe maybe fewer people have become have learnt the skills for that have also learnt about the book industry as well, so maybe it's like quite a unique pairing and skill set. So I kind of in the article that I wrote, I talked about how if it was me and I was saying yes to that kind of role, I know that this is this would be tough because obviously you'd be working full time, but the people I've seen who really are sort of thriving in publishing, they network a lot. They go to lots of different events. I'm thinking of one friend in particular who's actually a designer, but she goes to so much. She's so involved in different groups and book clubs and all the kind of stuff that you see advertised, like the conferences and stuff like that. But I know that she's done a lot of continual learning as well, and she has managed to work her up to quite a high design role now. So there are things that you can do to progress, but it is definitely a lot of it's not for the faint-hearted.
No, and I think you put it quite nicely as well, in that you were talking about, like, if you're going to do it, like, do it for a particular length of time, like work out what you can afford, how long you can afford to work on a lower salary, get that experience, and then maybe move somewhere else. And it's funny because your post that you put sort of inspired me to send out an alumni newsletter entitled "Are You Getting Paid Enough?" that was the title to the newsletter, and it just sort of made me think, actually, quite often people think they need to leave their current job because they aren't getting the salary that they need to live on, and almost talk themselves out of asking for a salary rise. But I think it's always worth having that question with HR and saying, I don't want to leave, but I can't afford to stay on this salary forever. So walking into a meeting with your boss or your manager and saying, can I, this is my CV now versus what it was when I've joined. These are the skills that I've got and the experience that I've got now. I'm looking around at equivalent jobs that are being advertised. This is the salary bracket that I would get if I left. What can you do about that to help? And maybe they say no, but if you don't ask, you don't get. And I think that's the sad thing, that you have to hop from job to job in order to, like, push up that salary bracket through tiny increments, and that's quite disruptive in many ways, because I think a lot of people like the sort of stability of going into a job, learning the ropes, and then being good at it, getting good at your job.
Absolutely. I do think it's something that really it's really important that people do have the confidence to talk about. I'm not saying you do it every 3 months or something like that, but I think it would be fair to do every year or 18 months to do a review of your ingoings and outgoings and see, just keeping on top of your finances. Because I know that for a very long time in my 20s, I had my head in the sand about money completely. I was happy at work, but I didn't want to look at my bank accounts and stuff like that, because I just didn't want to look, just didn't want to go there. But every year that I did that, I actually got more and more in the kind of trap. I think you mentioned you can get trapped, and then I had no confidence to talk to HR or my bosses about the fact that actually it wasn't sustainable, and keeping an eye on, like you say, the other roles outside of publishing that you do have the skills for, and looking at those salaries is important, because you do have options, like in terms of working in, like you say, other industries. But the more I've noticed within a company, if there is like a general theme that all of the staff are feeling the pinch too much, that is when my employers have done pay rises. So being able to have these conversations and know that this is something that does need to be spoken about, I think is really important. It's not going in and demanding more money for the sake of it, but it's kind of a form of self-care in a way, and also being able and carrying on being able to do a job you love, because I hand on heart find it actually quite heartbreaking, the thought of having to leave publishing, because I love it.
Yeah.
And I've had to diversify as a freelancer to make it work for me. Yeah.
And I think that's a little bit of I mean, it sounds like that's one of the things that a lot of people do, is they get a bit of a side hustle. And so maybe if you really do have a love for books, you want to work in the publishing industry in some way, shape or form, it doesn't always have to be that you have to try and go into a low paid publishing role to get that sort of creative side of you developed. I mean, I did have a friend who worked for a fairly straight up SEO web marketing business, so it was I guess you could say it's a little bit of publishing in there, but it was it was a lot of SEO, a lot more sort of web design side of things. And she started up Post-Apocalypse Book Club in London, which I remember being at the first meeting, and it was just like me, her, and like 5 other people. There was like 7 of us reading, I think it was The Road by Cormac McCarthy. Within 6 months they'd developed this book. She'd developed this book club into like a sort of a membership of like 150 people that like were regularly meeting up, and it expanded to Dystopian Book Club, Film Society, I think, as well. And then like the bookseller and other publishing people were inviting them to speak at events, because all of a sudden they were actually, they had their own niche expertise in an area of publishing that I guess it wasn't necessarily making them a lot of money, but it was sort of scratching that itch as a side hustle.
Definitely, and you never know where that could lead you eventually when you follow your interests. I think whenever I mentor someone, I think that one of the things I try and talk to them about is like really find out what it is that they love. I've worked with people who have it's been all about children's illustrated non-fiction. That's 100% what they've wanted to do, and I've helped them along that path. But I've also had people who are so into like fantasy fiction or YA, or just if you can find your niche and then follow that in some way, shape or form, whether you have a Bookstagram or a TikTok, book talk, or you start a YouTube channel, or you do a book club or anything like that, it can fulfill that creative itch, as it were, which I think a lot of people that work in publishing are really, really creative. Either haven't explored it yet, but it's a huge part of them that's driving them, or they are creative already. So yeah, I think that's a really, really important thing. And if you're doing that in the background, if a job does come up one day that you think is a salary that you can do, and you have this, it might be the thing that gets you the job over somebody else, because you've proven for however long consistently that like this is a thing. And it takes a lot to do something like that book club. That'll have been a lot of work.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think actually one of the other things is, because you mentioned mentoring as well, and talking to a mentor, and I think sometimes when you're in it, when you're inside, you're kind of, this is sort of like the day to day, these are the things I have to do, especially if you've got the financial pressures pushing down, weighing down on your mind, making you think I don't have time to do this thing because I've got to do the day job and I've got to pay the bills. It can really help, even if it's just like once a week for like 15 minutes to spend some time talking to another person who's either mentoring you or just sort of championing you, like to get help take you outside of that space and give you the almost permission to think about the other possibilities. And I think that's some of the things that I've done with students over time, and I do like a careers drop-in session, and sometimes the students don't need it, but other times actually that's quite helpful for them just to sit and meet me once a week, and I'll be like, what have you done this week? What jobs have you applied for? How can I help? who can I connect you with that might be able to give you some insight onto, oh, you want to work in audio, okay, I can find someone on LinkedIn who will mentor you in audio, or you want to work in children's publishing, okay, we know people that can help you learn a bit more about that side of the industry. And I think that's getting that outside input from wherever it might be can be a bit of a confidence boost, if nothing else.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. I had an amazing mentor for the first 8 years of my career, Belinda Gallagher. She's and she taught me so much outside, apart from teaching me everything I know about how to make books. She also taught me how to set boundaries. And at the end, if anything was going wrong, she'd say, Claire, it's only a book. Like I'd be like, yeah, but the deadline's now and blah blah. She's like, Claire, it's just books. And I'd be like, okay. or like we'd be working and it would get to sort of like 6 and she'd be like, why are you still here? And whereas I didn't have that in London at all, nothing like that. So I think mentors can help you in all kinds of areas, that if you don't have someone who's kind of walked that path ahead of you, it can easily just get lost in stuff and think, oh, this is the way it has to be, or that I've had numerous mentors inside with work and in other areas of my life, and I think they're really important.
I think I do, and I think confidence plays a big part as well, because I've got a load of books sat behind me. We've got Inside Book Publishing, book production. I love Alison Jones's This Book Means Business. Like she says it's not for publishers, she says it's for authors, but I say it's for editors, because there's nothing there that an editor wouldn't find useful about how to make books. There's also Lynette Owen's Selling Rights, so you could buy maybe like 4 or 5 books and you've pretty much read them, and that's going to tell you a lot about the UK bookselling and publishing industry, a lot of information in those things. There's also, have I got one? The Children's Writers and Artists Yearbook. That's a really good one as well.
I think you can access that online as well, can't you? I think you can access it online, maybe for a fee, but no, definitely. I've been working through, I've got it right next to me, the copy editor's workbook, just for a bit of my own confidence, really. Like, I don't think it ever stops, like, learning. I just thought, I haven't worked in-house now since 2018, so I was like, can I still remember how to do all of these things? And I've been going through it and going through the exercises, and it is this is it. You've got 15 years experience in the industry, Claire, and you're wondering a little bit whether you can still do it. So I think that's the difference between someone that's done the job for a little while and has that confidence versus someone that's never done it but thinks they can do it. Everybody can do it. I'm sure there's a part of publishing that anybody that's interested in books could do, and then getting themselves the confidence to feel that they can do it. I think that's where some of the training courses, and it doesn't have to be a degree, like you run short courses, there's loads of short courses available that show that give you like the opportunity to test out your skills, do like a marketing plan, or put together a book pitch, or whatever it might be, record some podcasts, and then that you've done it, and you're not just thinking, oh, I think I could do it. You can, and as soon as you've got that confidence you can do it, I think that's where the switch gets flipped, really. Because I knew I wanted to work in the film industry when I was younger, and I was a runner for a bit, and I was like, I know I can do this. I did like video editing courses, and I like networked. I was really young, and in the end I got offered a job in IT recruitment, which paid about 1,000 times more than I ever earned in publishing. So at like 18 I was earning like 35k, and I don't think I've ever earned that much in publishing on a full-time salary or a part-time salary, like whatever. It's so it was kind of like a bit too seductive as a job, but then I've come back to it in later life, and so I think that's the other thing, there's always time. Definitely. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think embracing learning extra skills is a really important thing, because if you can find something that is a genuine interest, I'm not talking about coming home from a long day at work and trying to teach yourself how to index or something like that. That wouldn't float my boat.
Yeah.
But if you are interested in like maybe learning some more like Adobe software, or I don't know if anyone is interested in like learning more about how to build websites or copyright it, all that kind of stuff. I think now's a really exciting time, because the internet you can just learn so much so easily. Like LinkedIn even on its own I've done quite a few LinkedIn courses, and they're like an hour long, and they're in 10-minute lessons, and I've listened to them in 10-minute chunks while I've been having my breakfast or something like that. There's a lot of opportunity to learn extra skills, and if you can figure out your thing that you love, whether it's audio or maybe you are into SEO, there are people out there, then you can quite quickly learn a lot and add extra stuff to your CV, and give you that confidence to go for and ask for more money, or look to other industries. Yeah, that's kind of my approach anyway.
Wow, I think do you feel like you've said anything that you wanted to say on this topic?
Yeah,
I think we've covered quite a lot of ground there. So I think maybe like if you were on a very, very low budget, I think books are a good way to just increase your knowledge of the industry and reaching out to people. And I think that's one final thing I would say is I don't know anybody in the UK publishing industry that wouldn't, if you just cold approached them and said, I'm just looking for some advice on how to get into the industry. I don't think I know anybody that wouldn't probably like go out of their way to help them. There was one time I put on Twitter, do I know anybody that wants to come and do our speed dating with students that are working in publishing day? And I think that was the most retweeted, most responded to post that I ever put on Twitter. I think it got like 20,000 impressions on Twitter, and from it about like 100 people said, really? We're happy to give up an hour of our day to talk to students for no fee. So like if you go, if you ask, then a lot of people will be happy to help.
Definitely. I think people in publishing, everyone I've met have been like genuinely the kindest, funniest, sometimes wackiest people. And everyone knows what it's like. Everyone knows it is hard to get the foot in the door, and they do know that it can be overwhelming. So a lot of people really do want to help. I was listening to Diary of a CEO, the podcast, yesterday, and they gave some tips for contacting people that if you want to get into an industry, and they said do send that message on LinkedIn or find them on Twitter and like do some sleuthing. Acknowledge that they're really busy, and that you'd really appreciate a moment of time. Could they shadow you even for a day? Could they have a call with you? You just never know who might turn around and say yes, as long as you like acknowledge that they've got a lot going on and that life's busy and stuff, but that and then follow it up with action and and especially if you've got stuff on your LinkedIn, or you've got something that you can show that you've been doing your Bookstagram for the last 6 months, or even less than that, or you've started a YouTube channel, that's going to click to somebody. This person's serious, and most people do want to help.
And I think that's the other thing. A lot of young people today think that, and also publishing possibly likes the jazz hands side of marketing. They like the people that are like, oh yeah, I'm all over Instagram, and they like the people that are all over BookTok because that's the latest hot new thing. But not everybody is an extrovert and wants to publish themselves on the internet. Yeah. That's not to take away from the people that are able to do it. Some bookie people are more introverted, and the idea of like putting themselves out there like that is just horrifying. But there's likely to still be something that you don't mind doing, whether that is saying like, writing some blog posts. And there's the publishing posts.
That's grown hugely, hasn't it? Since I remember seeing that their very first the very first one they did in lockdown and thinking this is exactly what people are making the best use of this time. Doing something like that, it's fantastic.
And they'll accept contributions, contributors from because that's kind of their ethos, was like, we're creating this to give people the opportunity to publish some things, and then they can say they've published some things. And so that, you know, there's textual places, but also, I guess, you know, maybe you're into fan fiction and you're, you know, you write fan fiction, maybe, you know, maybe you're an illustrator and you're putting together a portfolio of illustrations. As long as you've got some medium of sort of collecting examples of what you can do, it doesn't have to be always like what I call jazz hands, basically. It doesn't have to be like, look at me online.
That can be super overwhelming for sure. So yeah, definitely, it's just something that shows consistency in any form, really, that you really mean it, like this is you. You want to do publishing or whatever it is. And my line that I like saying to people is like, you just need to create undeniable proof that you can do the job, and that will, if you persevere with it, I really think that it's like gives you a really good chance of getting there in the end.
And so I think we've covered quite a lot today, and we could carry on talking about this for like the next 2 hours, I think.
Definitely, yep.
But hopefully that's helped some people in terms of thinking about how they might approach getting into the industry, or you know, especially in this current economic climate, there are some cost-effective ways of developing skills, and there are some cost-effective ways of I suppose working in publishing without maybe always working in publishing. And looking to, you've got to pay your bills at the end of the day, don't you? So if you have to take a job that is not necessarily where your heart is at to begin with when you're younger, that doesn't mean that all of avenues will close off in later life at all.
Not to go into despair about it. Like, if you think, right, I'm doing this for a year, 18 months, and then I'm going to do something different, I think that can help get you through that first bit where you're like, I'm gathering my skills, I'm building at the moment for the next thing.
And certainly on the distance learning degree, we can, like, students can work full time and study. So you know, there's always avenues again of like of going into a job, so you're getting a salary, and then doing, like, whether it's like distance learning or whether it's like a short course online or like LinkedIn, like you say, you can be doing that development at the same time as earning a salary. It doesn't have to be one or the other anymore. There's so many avenues out there, aren't there? Yes, agree. Cool. Okay, right. It's been lovely talking to you today. Thank you so much for your time, Claire. Thank you. Yeah, definitely. It's been brilliant. Thank you. And I hope this was useful for people.